So welcome to Reconsidering Digital Ecosystems for Curation. I'm Lindsey. I'm the head of the Digital Initiatives Department at Brigham Young University's Library. Presenting with me is Andy Spackman, our AUL for Collection Services, and I'll leave my co-presenters to introduce themselves and their institutions when they're up. I'm going to start us off today. So I'm describing a project that was fostered jointly between the lower units and the library administration at the BYU Library to establish a holistic vision for digital curation. The genesis of this project came when 3 area heads, myself, our special collections chair, and our metadata head, had a bit of a come to Jesus moment about our completely non-working born digital workflow. We thought maybe we can get a digital archivist to help us with this, but which one of us wants it? Which part will they do? We don't think they can do it all. And then as we talked, we just continued to identify more strategic problems around digital that we thought were over our collective pay grade. Some of these problems will probably sound familiar to many of you in this room. Digital curation problems, they're spanning not just units, but full divisions. There's an increasing volume and complexity of file types. We had few documented procedures and almost no specific digital policies. Our ecosystem, it can always be better, right? And most importantly, we had a lack of shared vocabulary and goals across the division. The most infamous example of this was I had a meeting once where it took us half an hour to realize the digital preservation manager and the head of the archival processing unit have completely different definitions of the word file. It was like, it did not work. So not only did people not know what the other units were focused on, we just didn't have a shared language. And as we identified the problems, we decided the units were probably in the best position to study and solve most of them, but we wanted an overarching strategy, and we thought it should be holistically brokered between ourselves and the administration. We thought that would be the most durable solution. So we drew up a committee charge to try and create that strategy and to make recommendations for some of these projects. We scoped it specifically to library-made or collected digital content, things like our web archive, our digitized masters, our special collections, born digital archival materials, etc. We gave ourselves 3 phases. We originally charged this for 1 year. Spoiler alert, that was a very stupid idea. If you're going to do this, don't do that. And then because of my digital preservation stewardship and my administration of several access repositories, I was selected as our chair. We called this a grassroots effort. You'll notice there's a decent stratification of types of positions and definitely across the divisions for this committee. And I'll note that it was the first time working together for a number of these committee members. I think our administration was probably just pleasantly surprised to get this proposal, and the approval of the charge was pretty straightforward, and thus we called it the Digital Content Exploratory Committee. And off we went. I wanted to detail quickly a little bit about the committee process and some of its most universal findings. So phase 1 looked internal. We were looking primarily at staffing, workflows, and systems. We defined a couple of terms, and then we interviewed 25 library employees, everybody that we thought touched some or completed one step in the digital curation lifecycle. And we would literally, in the interviews, show them these steps and say, which of these things do you think you do, and for what types of content? Do you know if the other steps are being done? Who's doing them? Where are the gaps? What's your vision? What's your biggest fear? What tools are you using? Do you like your tools? And we unearthed so much data, so many opinions, and a lot of questions. And we used those questions to inform our second phase, which was looking externally with a big literature review and environmental scan. And we tried to answer and just see what models were out there. If you're one of the people I interviewed for those interviews, thank you. You guys really helped us see what other options we had. Some of our insights from phase 1 and phase 2 is we just started noticing the digital curation lifecycle steps usefulness as kind of a macro strategy. If you can just get everyone in the building to know what those steps are, and to agree that they're all important and to start thinking about their digital projects in terms of completing these, if we could just get that far, we felt that we would be that much more capable and farther along. We just kept seeing digital projects and digital content that was made on an ad hoc basis that did not have all the steps and generally did not survive much past its champion's retirement date. We got a lot of validation everywhere we looked. It didn't seem like anybody feels confident enough to say, we have totally figured out Born Digital. We got all those steps. It's looking great. Nobody was really saying that for digital AV either. As far as staffing goes, we felt like we saw this common theme that when you pin the digital work onto one person, it can flounder a lot. The better option is to embrace weaving it through the divisions, weaving it through a lot of stewardships. And we felt places we interviewed who did that were further along than somebody who was just proud to have gotten one digital archivist FTE and let him go and then cried when they moved on 3 years later. Okay, so these 2 phases took about a year to create, and then we hit phase 3, which I can only describe as a little bit of a thorny patch. As much work as 1 and 2 were, phase 3 was definitely the hardest. As chair, it was a really delicate balance trying to break down those silos and help people see the upstream and the downstream work, help them get comfortable with multiple people commenting on their stewardships and strategizing them and thinking about what they might be doing in 5 years. Definitely some departmental opinions showed up. I didn't always succeed here. So just a warning to everybody that digital curation is a change instigator and change will bring resistance. As chair, I also had to keep us focused on high-level strategy just by virtue of getting everyone in a room and by having administration know that we're doing this and be thinking about it. We had solved a couple of problems early on, but I had to stop us doing that in phase 3 because we kept trying to do it and we'd get in these kind of downward spirals of if we just work hard enough, we can fix this one. And we had to say, nope, that's not what we're trying to do. We cannot solve all the digital problems. We're here to set a strategy, give it to administration, and then develop this over time. So phase 3 took a year in and of itself. We handed in our final report to our administrative council, and now Andy is going to describe how that part worked.
So after the 2+ years of work, the task force reported, well, we received intervening reports from the task force at the end of the first 2 phases, and then at the end, they brought the phase 3 recommendations to us. So administration then had to decide what to do about these recommendations. And it was a complex project, so the outcome is also complex. A lot of different recommendations. You won't read this, but this is just the list of the names of the recommendations, right? The executive team for the library, our regular weekly meeting was not enough to deal with these recommendations and to process them and make decisions about them. So we had to have supplementary meetings for 4 months to go through all of these. And then we had to take the holiday break to ruminate on them. But eventually, for each of these recommendations, we had to give a response, a decision, whether we're accepting it or deferring it or what have you. So as some examples of recommendations that we accepted and have already been able to complete, the recommendation, there's these certain policies, they should cross-reference each other. Okay, well, great. Administration's good at one thing, and that's tweaking policies. So we've accomplished that. Some others, the recommendations to create new positions, and a couple of those have already been done and are in the process of being filled. There were some that we accepted, but we tweaked a little bit. For instance, the recommendation to create an overarching strategic vision for digital content in the library. We thought that was a great idea, but instead of creating a separate document, since our purpose was to have this be holistic for the library, we added this language to the existing top-level policy statement and vision statement for the library's collections overall. We added this section about digital curation and content. Some of the recommendations that we accepted, of course, yet to be completed. Some of the new positions, we agree with those recommendations. We just don't have slots available for those yet. Of course, some system assessments are ongoing. We're in the beginning of a transition to a new digital asset management system. We're going with Orange Logic, so that's an example of one of those that is ongoing. There were some recommendations to create some new committees for the library. The first of those we're in the process of commissioning now, and then a lot of the recommendations that came from the task force, administration is actually going to delegate to some of these committees. The people who actually are working at the grassroots level are going to be the best situated to execute some of those recommendations. Some of the recommendations we've deferred. For instance, we're still having discussions about just to what level, what degree our library is going to commit to having a regular digital exhibits program as opposed to occasional one-offs. There's some other positions that we've deferred the decisions on. But through all this process, at the end of it now, at least at the end of this stage of the process, there's the question, well, did we win? Or at least did we learn something at the end of this? Can we find some roses among the thorns, right? And I think the answer is yes. I think we're in a better place. I'm confident that we at least have a better idea of where we are and where it is that we want to go. And more people have that shared idea or understanding. A few of the lessons that I think we can share with you. First is that the grassroots staff and the administration have complementary capacities. So, for instance, the administration had sensed that there was there was a problem. This nebulous aspect, lack of cohesion in our approach to digital content. But the staff, the grassroots, and the middle management, they're the ones who could actually see and identify and understand what those problems were. Of course, seeing and understanding the problem in specific is different from being able to address them. And so having the commission from administration to look into this, to perhaps even step on a few toes by looking into it, was important. And being able to address these things, on paper is not necessarily enough. What we need is some organizational and cultural change. Some vision for this ultimately to take full root. And in each of these, this requires patience and trust between administration and between the staff and the middle managers who are looking through this. Lindsey mentioned silos, and this is one of the other things that we learned, is that silos are actually pretty resilient. They don't just go away with the stroke of a pen. And in fact, you kind of have to keep looking over your shoulder, because in your footprints, the silos tend to recoalesce behind you. And so you have to keep watching that. And the reason why is because silos, they represent people's interests, things that they care about, or even their identities. You hired someone to do one thing, they thought, and now you're telling them that they need to do something else. And that can be really challenging for people, and it's really easy to go back into that silo, right? I kind of think about this as a Venn diagram. Venn diagrams are useful when we're coming up with a charge or a vision or a mission. We think about, where do our interests all overlap? And then in that core, we can create a charge and a vision, and we can all share that and advance with that. But the problem is that the rest of the circle for each individual still exists. They still have all those other interests. Those don't go away. So you want to focus on that shared core, but the rest of it is still there, and you have to deal with it. And that's why those silos are so resilient. Of course, this was a long process. It's not a controlled experiment. All the moving pieces are still moving while you're trying to measure them and understand them. So that's definitely something that both the team and administration experienced. And perhaps needless to say, but administration has a short memory or short attention span, and so the team had to periodically remind us of things they had already told us, or frame things for us again. And then something that we found is that it's tempting to re-litigate, especially because it's a long process, to go back and re-argue those interests that someone might still be holding on to. And so this is part of the cultural organizational change, working so that you can acknowledge people's ongoing disagreement, but still expect commitment from them with the decisions that are being made. So was there a happy ending to the process? I feel happy about it. Was it a perfect ending? Has the ending been perfected? Perhaps not. But yet at the same time, there has to be an ending. The task force, if it continued forever, would become its own silo, where all the people who really cared about digital content would be in a room talking to each other, right? So you have to cut it off at some point and spread those people back to their departments, to committees, some new committees, plant those seeds throughout the organization, because our objective was to have this holistic vision and communication. And I think that we've made a lot of progress in doing that. But at the end of all three presentations, we'll be happy to take any questions about our project. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this talk. And I'm really excited to kind of champion the department that we've built and what we've been able to do this past year. So most of this presentation is just me patting everybody else on the back who's done a great job. So I want to talk about basically the first year of creating a digital strategies department and trying to move to having a digital asset management system, which we have not had, going away from looking at vended solutions to building out the infrastructure to host an open source solution for a digital asset management system. And some of the key projects we identified and were able to implement in this first year, while building a department, which was chaotic, fun, and exciting all at the same time. So what is a digital strategies team? It's me. I was the first one. So that is my consultant, my dog, Luke. So he had to hear me rant and ramble about storage needs, how versioning works, and all these other things. And that's why he's a tacoot. So I was initially doing digital production from print and analog to digital material, and working on a task group that we had designed to look at digital ecosystems in years past. And with the help of the executive team, we were able to get consultants to come in and give us an analysis and a recommendation on what we should do to re-envision our digital strategy. And this is where it started going. So I was tasked at the beginning to kind of get everything up to speed, start looking at solutions, and get ready to help onboard people that would come in and help us. So this is the structure that we currently have. I'm sorry that it is not very readable, but these will be available later. But what we have in our digital strategies team is a service-based team led by the head of technology, divided into two sectors, which is enterprise applications, which is support for our vended and open source solutions from a server side and back-end side, IT on hardware and devices, and a developer, which we were fortunate enough to get this year. So a web apps developer. On the other side is digital collections and repositories, led by my supervisor, Sarah Cogley, who was instrumental in making all of these happen. I am the digital asset librarian, and we also have an accessibility and project management librarian, two institutional repository librarians, one lead and one newly hired institutional repository librarian, and a digital assets and metadata specialist. So this was in part rehiring or hiring new hires and restructuring of existing people in the library to take on new roles. So it required a lot of flexibility. But what it did that I think was really beneficial is it helped break or get some of the people in the silos of either special collections or CTS cataloging, or I was in access services at the time, and get us all talking and learning a little bit more about what the stressors were. So when we built out this department, it was a little bit easier to identify some of the pressure points as we go through. And we tried to maintain this idea of service to experts and learning how to interface with as many people to understand the implications of projects and stuff like that, while still having to build out this ecosystem. So how did we get here? Assessment. So there was a task force that I was on years before where we wrote a recommendation for a vended solution. It ended up being about 70 pages long, but if you've ever seen me on emails or Sarah Cogley, you know that we were trying to canvass as many people as we possibly could to see what was going on. We did our strategic hirings and our staff reorganization. So in this first year, we have some key projects that we were able to do. So the one that I will talk about the most is obviously picking and starting to move forward with the digital asset management system. Initially, we had hoped that we could find a system to house everything and distribute out, like a one solution to rule them all kind of idea. Did not work out. What we've decided to do is, now that we have the support on the system side and the development side, is to start looking at the strategic connections between built for purpose open source solutions or vended if needed, but basically finding ways to connect those and make it more that the front end interface eventually will be united. To do that, one of the things that we started to do was a metadata standards working group. So this included members from Special Collections Archives, members from CTS, members from our new department, all talking together about what are the metadata needs from a Dublin course perspective for each type of material that we ingest, and also each repository. So we ended up building a libguide internally that organizes metadata based on the definitions, which we found out Dublin Core isn't the greatest place to look for the definitions of what things are. So we've been trying to refine that to make it more useful. But this process has allowed us to kind of see how metadata is relayed in the different systems and for different types of items, so that when we go into the new DAM, we have a better idea of the architecture that we actually need, especially if we're going to store things and possibly have them send out to other places. Data cleanup is never ending, but we're working on it. I'm in the process of migrating collections from Omeka to Omeka S because it's a better data cleanup system, and then moving that into our new system, which I can talk about now. We picked Hyrex. So we wanted to be pretty conservative with our ambitions for Hyrex. So we were like, well, we won't go bleeding edge. We can't do that. But the more and more we looked at it, now we're waiting for 5.1 Hyrex because the Rails needs to be updated so that it'll work. We're going to do Fedora 6 because of OCFL. And we are really interacting with the Samvera community in this early phase on a very forward-facing frontier. But I am assured by my systems and developer people that this is something that needs to be done. And I really appreciate having these perspectives that we did not have in years past, because now we know the possible and we're getting to learn, because we can ask the problems and have people that have outside information give us these solutions. So this is something that we are really fortunate to have and find the talent that was willing to come to Buffalo. And this is something that we really want to leverage. The other thing that we really like about Hyrex is that there is a long-standing existing community that has done a ton of work that we can steal. We do not want to reinvent the wheel, and through talking, we do understand that Hyrex is a great starting place. It's a great place to interact with the open source community and create these strategic connections, because it's long-standing and it's been around and it has that infrastructure built in. But we do understand that this is not a permanent solution, and we do have to start considering the specific needs of UB and finding a way to make that accessible back into the community for reuse is one of the things that we're going to try and be doing moving forward. but we are only at phase 1. So these are all very exciting future things. So the main reason we made this decision is because of OCFL. We have had to migrate, and we have had things stored in places that we are not happy with. So having a human readable, platform independent way of storing files is very exciting for us, because that means that we can pivot and not be as worried about the preservation elements as we normally are. It also allows for more unique storage solutions than what we are used to. We are really hoping to figure out the implications of hosted cloud storage versus on-prem storage. We really are hoping for on-prem storage, but this is also more of the going beyond the libraries and talking to central IT, talking to procurement, and those are all issues that we are working towards. But we feel confident with OCFL we have that way to maintain everything and make it readable to the next group of people that we hand it off to. And we're trying to make this documented and forward-facing so that anybody coming in can actually understand why we made the decisions, because we are slamming our head against the wall trying to figure out how the decisions were made in the past. Institutional knowledge leaving because of COVID and all the retirements has been a dramatic change for us, and we are trying really hard to push forward with that. So this is what our stack may look like. We are looking at Blacklight with a Redis Sidekick, doing Hyrax Ruby on Rails, with a PostgreSQL SQL and Solr, with an underlying Fedora and OCFL underneath that. Subject to change because we are in phase 1. I'm really interested to get into the user interface issue because we are an Alma Primo institution and we need to make sure that we maintain a one-stop shop for our users to make sure that they can still get to the material. And we've put in a lot of effort and a lot of work through some of my colleagues to make that a very nice experience for our users. And I do not want this to depart or break any of that work. Because if we get too divisive in the things that we use, I don't know if you have Teams box, Dropbox, Google Drive, anything like that, the more spread out it gets, the more chaotic it is for the user. So that is one of the things that we're looking at and considering, but we want to make sure that whatever we pick, it is easily and seamlessly integrated for the user. And then I'm just going to do a very quick analysis. I left these in here for the periphery, so if you're interested, you can read about the analysis because we looked at DSpace and Hyrax, and this is the comparison. But we stole from University of Washington in St. Louis on how they identified their most critical points of evaluation of dam systems, and we created a 34-point most critical one that we analyzed, and we had it into different sections. So we did file storage and preservation as one, asset management, which was metadata and deposit. Then we did asset management as management and reporting. We did discovery, development and maintenance outlook, and then communities of engagement. So this is how we created our point system to actually evaluate these systems as we were going through it. We had them both on Docker containers and virtual machines. So we were able to play with both of them simultaneously and do synchronous testing with the exact same materials to see what the experience was like. So that is my time, and I would like to hand it off. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam Strom, and I'm the Director of Distinctive Collections and Digital Strategy at Paul B. Galvin Library at Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. And I'd like to talk to you today about the past, present, and future of our institutional repository. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of our IR, some of the lessons we've learned over the years it's been in existence, and some of our unexpected successes. I want to talk about the current state of the IR and some of what we are hoping to do next, and then some of the questions that we're asking. We are kind of in the earliest stages of another migration, which is a great time to think about things and a scary time to consider everything that might be lying ahead. So the first institutional repository at Illinois Tech was a DSpace repository. We launched it in 2010. It will surprise no one in this room, I think, to find out that we didn't have a whole lot of faculty adoption. And so partially for that reason, it had begun to grow into kind of like an ersatz digital asset management system. Lots of people around campus were putting things in and restricting them to specific groups. This led to a complicated collection structure. We had sub-collections that went 5 levels deep in some places, and equally complicated permission structures where we would have custom groups that had to be updated on a semester or annual basis to keep up with staffing at the library or across the campus, and that was not sustainable. The library became the primary depositor of content with limited use by faculty and students, and that was really dependent on discipline or some individual's personality. And it was a self-deposit model, which was really easy for us, but that meant that we had very uncontrolled and very inconsistent metadata across the repository. In about 2016, we decided it was time for a change, and we selected Islandora for the next version of our repository. We were already using Drupal for our library website, and we felt comfortable with that. And we felt like Islandora was a pretty good fit with our existing staff skills and experience. The price was also right. We made a couple of big pivots in making that change. One of them was we simplified collections and permissions as much as possible. This meant that we did have to give back some of the material that we had that had a better home elsewhere, sometimes just in Google Drive. But that was actually fairly painless, considering. So we took almost everything in the repository, put it into one collection, and made that collection open to global users by default. The big exception to that was our theses and dissertations that we get from ProQuest. Those are restricted just to people with a functioning iat.edu email address. We moved to a mediated deposit model. We thought this probably means more work for us, but we will have a chance to look at the data, to talk to people about their data, and maybe end up with more quality description once things are in the repository. And then the biggest pivot, I think, is that we adopted the IR as our digital collections platform for the university archives. We had never had a place to put things in any kind of cohesive way to give access to them from the archives. And this meant also that even if adoption didn't increase, we would guarantee that the system got use and it wouldn't just sit there and kind of, well, not rot away. Hopefully it won't rot, but gather dust. So we've had the Islandora repository going for a little over 5 years. And we've learned a lot of lessons, but these are a few of the big ones. Deposit and adoption has not increased. We have learned that some of the changes we made and fancy little things we added were not as compelling to us as they were, or were not as compelling to our faculty as they were to us. And we are forced to think about whether or not there's anything we can do in terms of added functionality or added services that are really going to move the needle here. On the other hand, the integration of digitized and born digital archival material has been a success for both staff and researchers. For staff, it has cut down on scanning or sometimes rescanning time. People are not having to field as many requests for images, and our users sometimes don't even need to contact us. They can go to the repository, look for things there, download research-grade images, and not even need to involve the library. We've also built connections between our repository and our finding aids in archive space, and the existence of the material in Islandora has helped us sell ourselves as a repository for people that are looking to donate archival collections. And there's one really good example of that I'll talk about in just a sec. The other lesson we've learned is that mediated deposit is not the collaborative venture we hoped it would be. It's really easy to talk about getting a deposit and then going back and talking to the person and improving their metadata. It's not as easy to do that in the real world. And so generally, once people submit their material, they kind of consider themselves done with it and are not as concerned as we are about maybe harmonizing or enhancing their descriptive data. We have had some unexpected successes. One of those is that we have been able to use Islandora as the publishing platform for digital publications from IIT Press. Our press was kind of a defunct entity, and we have been able to, even if it's just slapping that logo on a PDF, we've been able to offer institutional support and approval for things around campus, and sometimes that really matters to people. And we've frankly just been able to provide a place for people to put some of these things. We've been using Islandora in tandem with OJS. We host a handful of journals for colleagues on campus at the library, and we've been able to use Islandora to store data sets that weren't going to natively work with OJS very well, and then build connections between the two. On the archival side, I think our most unexpected success had to do with the papers of artist and alumnus Mary Henry, who's pictured here. Her family was looking for a home for her papers, and they talked to us, and they were so compelled by the fact that we had all of this stuff online that, A, they decided to give the collection to us, which is great, but they also made sure that the entire collection was digitized to our archival specifications. And though all of those files were dropped off with the paper files, which meant we could start putting things into the repository right away, which was awesome. Perhaps the most unexpected success we had was when a faculty member contacted us and said, hey, I'm using this open textbook by an author at another institution. He's retiring. He's losing his web space. Can you help me? So we contacted that author, talked to him. He applied a Creative Commons license to the book, passed it on to us, and gave us permission to host it in perpetuity. This means that our professor and his students get to use this book, but everyone else around the globe does as well. Not something we were thinking we might use this for, but it worked out really well. So where things stand now, we are stuck, both based on some software interdependencies, on older versions of Drupal and Islandora. With technology stack, we don't really want to touch a whole lot because we're a little worried the whole thing will freeze up. Server space is a recurring issue for us. This is living on a Linux server, and the space is provisioned to us, and our inability to reliably predict what kind of space we're going to need has really impacted our ability to be responsive and flexible with things like mass digitization, data sets, and things like that. We still have inconsistent descriptive metadata and inconsistent application of authority control. Again, with the mediated deposit, that has not solved all of our issues. And the bulk of our non-library deposits are those theses and dissertations from ProQuest, so that's a whole lot of author-supplied metadata that we're still dealing with. And adoption and awareness have gotten a little better, especially with students, but they remain low and still highly variable between disciplines and departments. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, we're a fairly small shop, and there's not one single person for whom the repository is a responsibility or in their purview. So this is all a team effort. It's very much collaborative, lots of different people working on things. I tend to view that as a huge positive, but it does come with its challenges. And then what's next? So we are in the pre-migration discussions at this juncture. We're planning to move things to the current version of Islandora, and this requires essentially just building a new Islandora from scratch. One thing we want to do is some pre-migration metadata harmonization, especially with names where the same name might exist in our repository in 5 different versions. And then once things are in, we want to use Drupal taxonomies to link to authorities where appropriate. Another thing we want to do is based on the University of Prince Edward Island's Island Scholar repository, which is shown here. We want to use Drupal taxonomies to build faculty pages where we can take someone's objects in the repository, add things like a bio, a headshot, other information they might want to include, citations to things outside of the repository. And that could, in some cases, mean that faculty members don't need to even manage their own little website moving forward. We're hoping that's a value add for people. We'll see. And then we want to do some fresh user experience and needs assessment research to better understand our users or maybe our potential users. We think we have an idea sometimes of what people need or what people want, but it's probably time to go back and verify that that's true. In terms of the challenges we think we're facing moving forward, we need to do a good job of really identifying and understanding the library's responsibilities and priorities around this project. Sometimes it's easy to just say like, all right, it's migration time, let's do it. and not really sit back and think about like, what do we need or want to get out of this? What do we need to provide to the campus? And we need strategies for meaningfully and effectively communicating that with campus partners, especially those whose priorities might not align with ours or whose understanding doesn't include the things that we kind of take for granted. We also need some project management. Like I said, we're a small staff. We're really responsive. We're really good at finding solutions and digging into cool problems. But that sometimes means that we all collectively can get a little in the weeds. And I think this process, more than some of the others that we do, is going to really require some consistent and persistent project management. Someone keeping their eye on it from a bird's eye view, making sure that we're moving things along and not digging too deeply into some hole just because we think it's kind of cool. And then finally, we're going to need to balance the needs of the library and our campus community. Hopefully, our new user experience librarian will gather all sorts of really cool data about what people would like out of this repository. And then we're going to have to do a job of figuring out what we can and can't provide. So the last thing I want to talk about is some of the big questions we're kind of asking ourselves at this stage in the pre-migration process. The first is, what are our priorities here? Are we mainly trying to just bring this technology up to date and make it a little more stable? Are we attempting to make things as flexible as possible so we can kind of roll with the unexpected uses of the repository as they come through? Or maybe do we prioritize what the library needs and wants? We're the people that use this more than anyone else, after all, and maybe we deserve to do things the way that makes sense for us. I don't know. And then how do we determine the appropriate allocation of time and effort? I think this is going to be a huge process. The last Islandora process took 2 to 3 years. Hopefully it'll be maybe a little faster this time. And we need to decide, there are lots of things we could do, but especially now that we have evidence that making some of these enhancements does not actually increase use or increase deposits, we need to think pretty hard about where we put our efforts and what we concentrate on. And then how do we encourage more non-traditional use of the IR? This has been the thing that I think a lot of us have been most excited about at Galvin Library. And how do you convince people to use the IR in ways you're not thinking about? And then what guidelines do we need to set up? Because we could very quickly end up back in the Wild West of DSpace, which was part of the whole reason we migrated in the first place. We've also talked about integrating the IRs into workflows around campus. There are lots of ready-made use cases out there, but we need to think about how, if we integrate the IR into somebody's workflow, that is librarian time and responsibility. That also means that we start to become, as one of my colleagues always says, herders of cats, especially if we're working with undergraduates, trying to get them to say, hey, it's time to get things into the repository here. Is that a job that we want? And then how do we ensure our ability to be responsive in a changing landscape? I could have written this point before all of the things that we talked about yesterday, but the landscape continues to change in all sorts of ways. And how do we make decisions now that are going to allow us to be responsive to things we're not even thinking may happen down the road? And speaking of that, what about AI? This is both a kind of a functional question. We, like everyone else, are getting hit by robots very consistently. They typically have not brought our whole repository down, but they have made it slow enough that it's not worth using. And connected to that, we've started to have talks about how do we talk to faculty about this. If we are saying, hey, sorry, the repository is really slow. It's getting crawled by bots from all over the world. Oh, also put your material in this open repository. Do we need to even think about what it means to have an open repository now and think about not just how we communicate that to people, but are there changes we need to make? I will not say that I have answers to any of these questions, but if any of you have thoughts, I am eager to hear them. So the last thing I want to say is thank you to you and to the folks who are currently working on this team and have worked on it in the past. Without all of the people on this slide, this could not have happened, and just wanted to take a moment to thank them. So that is all for our presentations, and I think now we have some time for questions.
Hey, Snowden Becker from the Lux program at Stanford. I have a question for Lindsey, and this is equal parts genuine curiosity and just gossip. When you asked, perhaps you can confirm, I'm guessing that when you asked people, do you like your tools, you got a lot of really great qualitative information. Can you expand on what some of the responses were and what you did with that information once you got it?
It is a good question. I think, we had immediate requests for all sorts of resources, digital preservation, give me more storage. The curators, I want more web archiving things to do. I want this big curator station up and running so I can bring in more manuscript items. I wanted our dams to be upgraded. And so there were those, and then we started hearing about the level of scripting that some people were comfortable with, and we had to start realizing that there was a gap, I think, between what our IT and developers thought they were doing versus what we wanted them to do. So it was interesting, and yeah, like Andy said, I'm hoping that just we have more clarity. One of the recommendations was for administration to make LIT allocate a little bit more dev time in general, which I think I will put them to work. So yeah, did that answer your question? Okay. We did interview Stanford, by the way. They were great. Thanks to Hannah and our team.
Hi, Teresa Hazen from the University of Arizona. You talked a little bit about your digital archivist position, Lindsey. Sort of means everything and nothing, and how you wove it. The intention was to weave that throughout maybe the different positions. I was a little unclear. Could you clarify a little bit on how you went about doing that? Because we share some similarities at our institution around kind of siloing and the role of a digital archivist. Okay. Thanks.
So the digital archivist, we met some where their whole job was digital preservation. We met some where they were the developer and they were the curator and they were also the web curator. They can wear so many hats, and this was honestly the one that we talked about a lot, and we actually talked about it after the committee was over to keep refining it, because we do have a digital preservation manager. So it ended up being kind of a really fine balance. What we decided that the area that we could probably condense the most tasks was in special collections. It'll be a special collections, and the vision of it was kind of a PM for special collections. It's going to manage the web archive, while our digital preservation manager still has kind of we decided we're going to let our digital preservation manager manage the tech side, hand them an external hard drive to take to a donor, and this person could actually be an archivist and move it through the appraisal and hopefully build an accession record, that kind of thing for it. So that's what we're hoping is we'll see how it goes. They literally have their last interview for that position today. So. And also I should say that the digital archivist, I think, I'm hoping that they will be a good bridge. That's one of the hopes, that's been a traditional area of multiple silos collaboration is that person's main.
Hi, this is Homa from Loyola University Chicago. I have a question for Adam. As you mentioned about the 3 version of IR, and also you guys encourage additional use of IR, do you have evolving your collection policy for your IR? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
We don't have a concrete collection policy for the IR, partially because we have found more success with some of these uses that we wouldn't have been able to put into the collection policy. It's something that we probably ought to consider. There's probably guidance we could offer. And while we want to say, like, yeah, we can take whatever, we have already had to tell people, like, no, that data set's too big. Or, one of the nice things about Islandora is that we can take pretty much any file format. They may not be able to do anything with it, but you can put it in and get it back out. And that is or isn't worthwhile to some folks. But no, we don't have a collections policy, at least a forward-facing one, that anyone can see. And it is, I was thinking last night as I was looking over these notes that our About page will need a refresh, and I think there's probably helpful guidance that we can offer that will both give people the appropriate expectations for the repository, but then also give them some ideas on what we can and can't do.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your attendance. Appreciate it.